All right, today on the podcast, I'm joined by James Capo. He is the Chief Executive Officer at Omeda, which, if anybody listening does know, is a platform combining a CDP, marketing automation, and subscription management in one place. And we were just talking before hitting record. I'm excited to learn more about that. But James, thank you very much for joining me, man.
Yeah,
I
Paul,
really
great to be
appreciate it.
here and looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. I asked kind of all my guests at the beginning if you could kind of set the stage and just give us a brief background on your career
Yep.
and your story in media and Omeda and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to do that. So first, yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
I think so. I've spent pretty much my entire career in the media industry or supporting the media industry as I am today at Omeda. But started with at the Associated Press back in the early 2000s, primarily on the broadcast side, on television, radio, and helping the AP support actually local TV and radio stations with their production. Worked on a product called ENPS, which is still used in hundreds of television newsrooms around the world as a production tool. So first part of my career I spent at the AP, was there for about 8, 10 years from that. So always been embedded in the sort of the overall media ecosystem. I was a journalism major as well in business and really enjoyed my time at the AP, great organization and is still, very vital to us today in the industry. I left the AP and ended up in business school and through that got back into the media industry, but primarily on the B2B media side. A couple organizations I worked with, one called Cygnus Business Media, which is now called Endeavor Business Media, and then also Access Intelligence, which has brands the community might know, primarily Ad Exchanger, Ad Monsters, the Folio brand. They have the Men's brand from back in the day for those that are familiar with that. But they're also in energy, engineering, healthcare. And at both those organizations, Endeavor Business Media and Access Intelligence, I was a publisher at Endeavor, ran the fire, law, and EMT brands, where I had editorial, but also sales and product. And then at Access Intelligence, I ran digital experiences across the portfolio. So beginning to understand how the audiences interact both in email and web and subscriptions and events, all those things and all the technology that you have around that. And while I was there, we had Omeda, and I joined Omeda in 2016 as the chief revenue officer and ultimately became the CEO a few years ago. But the reason I joined Omeda is, I think some things we'll talk about today, Paul, but media companies had what we affectionately call the Frankenstack. And I lived it as a lot of media operators have done, where I have audience data in 5 or 6 different platforms. And from my point of view, if media companies believe that their two most critical assets are content, obviously, and also their audience, why do audience professionals or marketers have to log into 17 different systems to manage their audience? And so that's the basic problem at a fundamental level we solve is we are a single audience brain, audience operating system for the media and publishing industry. And that's kind of what we built and what we've grown into. And that's what we do today. We work with about 200 different publishers across the spectrum, managing their audiences and also activating those audiences through, as you said, a CDP, marketing automation, and subscription platform.
That's awesome. And my kind of next question I have was just talk a little bit about Omeda and how local media companies use the platform. You kind of went into that a bit, but based on our kind of conversation before we officially started going, I had brought up HubSpot because I'm in a group and the topic for the week was something to do with HubSpot and Omeda.
Sure.
And you had some great just riffing off of that. So let's dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, no,
You're saying like HubSpot is just a stand-in for an alternative. There's others like that and everything. A little bit of,
absolutely. And these are, I will be the first one to say, these are all great platforms, right? They all have, all have their use cases depending on what you're trying to do. But where we're different, and I think this is where Omeda shines, particularly for the media and publishing industry, is that number one, we recognize that the content is the product. That's a different mindset, and that we understand as just fundamentally as my organization understands that the content is the product. Now, what does that mean? What that means is that content can live across multiple different products for the publisher. And the publisher, in this example that I'm using for you, Paul, right? your brand, right, is you have your website, you have your newsletter, you have your podcast, you might have an event. Those are all different products that we help you manage. And as an audience member, I might be very engaged in your newsletter, or hopefully I listen to your podcast, but I might not. I might come to your website. And where we're different is we manage the audience member across those product definitions. And we also create a single audience ID. So James Capo at Omeda, James Capo at Gmail. In our world, that's one record. And I might sign up for your newsletter with my Gmail. I might sign up for my with my for your event or marketing emails with my Omeda account. But the way we structure and the way we manage this database and the audience is both around the customer ID, but also the concept of product management. And that's something that pure play marketing automation systems like a HubSpot doesn't have a concept of. And it's a unique, when you talk to media operators and you start to kind of go that, layer, yes, HubSpot has marketing automation, we have marketing automation, but you really need to understand how they manage and structure the data and how that operates for you to make your life a little simpler from there. And so fundamentally, we manage the user ID or the audience ID, but also manage the product rules and definitions attached to that user ID, and then also able to activate against it. So if you want to create queries and cohorts on everyone who read this article, came to this event, opened this email, is a paid subscriber, is not. All those are products built around the user. So it's a little nerdy and a little slightly into the weeds, but as you talk to media operators and you really take that next look at it, you're like, oh man, that makes a lot of sense because that's how my audience thinks about me. The brand is the high level, but the products where I'm communicating, and it's also how your audience is engaging with you across that. And what that allows us to do is start to build that connection and sort of that lifetime value of that audience member. So and it simplifies the workflow too for media companies, where, as we said at the beginning, you don't need to have 5, 6, 7 different systems to do this. We've made it harder on ourselves.
That's so cool, man. I see seen in a few different ways, on two different sides. What you're saying about my business, got my website, my newsletter, my podcast.
Right.
I know there's listeners of podcasts that don't have the newsletter and vice versa.
Right.
So I was like, oof, yeah, yep. I see the need there. And then when you're talking about on the other, like the consumer, whatever you want to call it side, I will, sign up for a newsletter with my business thing. And then if I'm going to go to an event, I'll use my personal Gmail account that I want to, because that's where I want to be able to access it quickly and everything like
exactly.
that.
And that's the user telling you a signal, and it's the user saying, hey, I'm still interested in your brand. And if you don't have the right infrastructure and a true audience platform like Omeda, it's hard to see that, right? And it's not just email. Like, we'll take any type of additional information. We're able, using some algorithms, also obviously AI now, we can say, okay, this is Paul, and because he gave us his email plus this additional piece of information, we now know it is a single record, right? And we can merge that on your behalf.
Very cool. Hold on, I had the wrong tab up. Sorry.
Yes,
So this might be a good spot. I had a friend in the same group reach out, and so I didn't have this in the prep because he messaged me after I sent these to you.
Sure.
But this might be a good spot to fit this in. He'd found out that I was interviewing him, and he had kind of a question that he wanted me to filter to you.
Yeah.
And his was around AI, and we're legally obligated to talk about AI in 2026 on this podcast.
You cannot have a media podcast or a media conversation without talking about AI.
Yeah, right. They would drag me out of here if they didn't say it. But his question was, with the proliferation of, and I can't remember exactly how he phrased it, of just agents, the agentic AI rising. Are you seeing, you might be the person to ask, are you seeing, how's this affecting, I don't know how to phrase this, first party data? Can you tell the difference between like an agent? Does that make sense? Or how are you guys thinking about it, addressing it? Well, and once again, sorry, this wasn't in the prep. I'm kind of
no. It's a good question, and I think we also need to rephrase a bit on define what first party data is, right?
Okay, yeah.
So let's I think take one step back. If your friend or this conversation is, hey, first party data is a cookie visit to my website, and I am cookieing that individual and seeing that cookie navigate on the site, can we or others tell if that's an agent or a person? I can't sit here and say you can. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. However, if that person or that agent or individual signs up for your newsletter, pays with a credit card, registers for your website, I would hope that your media partners and your folks that are listening to this are asking additional information about that subscriber audience member, right? Zip
Hmm.
code. I think we should talk about zip code here from a local media perspective. I think zip code is the one thing all local media companies should be asking right away. And I see so many local media companies don't ask just
Huh.
simple Gmail or email and zip code, and I'll explain why
Okay.
in a second. So in that sense, yes, right? In that sense, if we see that first party data and we think about first party data in terms of both declarative data that I am giving you information on a form, as well as behavioral data in terms of what I am browsing and looking at, then yes, Omeda can start to understand what has patterns that might be an agent or not. Now, maybe the question is, do you care if an agent is paying you, is able to swipe a credit card and pay you for that? Maybe we don't because they're
Yeah.
giving you money, right? I don't know the answer to that one yet. I don't know if we're there. But defining what I would call anonymous traffic, which is the cookie coming as an agent, is different than what I would call a known audience member who is now giving you declarative data, and you're able to put them into your ecosystem as something you know about. Now, what Omeda does, what we help our clients with, is we help convert that anonymous to a known individual or known subscriber slash audience member. So that part of the ecosystem, yes, we absolutely can start to see patterns. We can start to see things. Am I going to sit here and tell you I'm going to be able to tell you what agents are going to look like in the next 6 to 12 months? The world kind of changed in the last 45 days with Claude and co-work and everything that has happened
Hmm.
here. But the short answer is yes. The long answer is we're going to continue to look at that. So I do think it's important to define first party data in this conversation and what it is. And obviously we don't have your friend on here to kind of say what they're thinking, but in those two scenarios, I hope I answered that question. So
Yeah, no, that was brilliant. That's why I love this podcast, because I get to ask people smarter than myself on topics about and you're really good at explaining it too, in a way that's easy to digest and
sure.
all that. I my next question I kind of had was, I saw a post from you, and you kind of touched on this before, the Frankenstack, I believe you
Yeah.
said, but I saw a post and I quote on LinkedIn. The quote was, that everybody is planning their 2026 tech stack like they're building a spaceship. But most growth won't come from adding tools. It'll come from stripping away complexity so your teams can actually act on the data they already have.
Yep.
And I agree with that. How are you thinking about stripping away that complexity? And could you just expand just on that kind of post, that thought
Yeah,
you had a little bit?
absolutely. And it,
Yeah.
and it again, it what partly is I was a operator. I dealt with this. I did it day to day for, you know, almost a decade working across media companies and trying to find my audience. And in some ways it's very simple, right? It's like we've discussed this already. I had my email in this platform. I had my subscriber information in this platform. I had my authentication and gating, data in this platform for the website. I then had Google Analytics, and then I had converting that unknown to own, and then I had my event or webinar platform, right? And so my audience member is living in all these systems.
Hmm.
And I can't, and the pressure on media companies to deliver both an experience for the audience member, but number one, number two, to deliver ads, right? Obviously, and advertising to these folks. We are making it harder on ourselves. We are making already a hard business even more complex and harder. And so I just fundamentally don't understand, if audience is such an important part of a media business's life and sort of livelihood, why in the hell do you have that person in 17 different platforms? I just fundamentally just don't get it. Now, what a lot of media companies did, and I did it to be very transparent, is I would pull my data out of my email system, I would pull my data out of my subscription system, I would pull my data out of my web authentication, out of my print circulation system, and I would put it into a database, and then I would try to query it, ask it questions, and I'd find a really cool maybe segment that's doing some interesting things. Well, then I got to load it back up onto all those systems, right? I got to put it back in my email system and put it back into my subscription system to make an offer. I got to maybe update the red wall, and then I got to pull my event data in. So you're adding steps, and what I fundamentally took a step back is like, this is a workflow problem. And if I had editors logging into 17 different CMSs, his heads would have exploded, right? There's no way an editor can do that. And there are tools out there that allow content to be distributed in a very sort of atomized way where it's moving across atomic way where it's moving across all these platforms. Yet we didn't do that for audience. And so that is kind of my way of like, we have to simplify this. And then the question is, are there tools out there that let you do that? Obviously, self-servingly, yes, there is. And I'm passionate about this, that I do think this is one of the key fundamental problems in media is we haven't addressed audience as a workflow problem. And we've addressed it as a tech problem when it's actually a workflow problem. And that's where I've said reduce that complexity, make it simple, and be better for your audience because you can now see them across your product life cycles. And it's better for your advertisers because you can offer a more robust environment for it. That's also quicker, more intuitive, and frankly more performant as well for both the advertiser and hopefully the audience member.
Man, well said. You know how I can tell Omeda's a great product. The way you talk about the friction there, it hits me and my company like so much in a different way
I
because
appreciate that.
I'm a scrappy bootstrapped company. I was basically a freelancer. It's now a
Yeah.
small company. It's like, oh, I got Google Drive over here and this over here, my podcast host over there, and it's just like, I mean, and one theme from this show, talking to so many journalists and publishers and business side people and everything, it's just how spread thin everybody is. Getting the reporting out and keeping the lights on and everything. So,
Media is not doing more with more. They're trying to do more with less, right?
yeah,
And
right.
and that's, a larger issue, I believe, just particularly on the journalism side, where we need, I think, quality journalism in our society from here. I obviously believe that, but whether you're a pure hard news organization or you're a special interest publication or you're a hardcore B2B, right, covering the HVAC community,
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, it is about connections, right? It's connecting that content with the right audience and then being able to monetize that in a way for whatever business model the media company thinks is best. Could be subscriptions, could be advertising, could be lead gen, could be sponsorship and events. All that's available to media companies, but I just think you're able to do it so much faster when you have a better infrastructure on your audience from
Very
there.
cool. Yes, well said. Um, my next question I had is was if you were launching a local news company from scratch in 2026,
Yeah.
how would you structure audience capture and monitor? Well, just everything we've talked about from day
Yeah.
one, and maybe this is a good time to talk about zip code, like you were
Yeah.
talking about
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
So I'll let you take it. Yeah.
Yeah. So great question. And I think, listen, I have opinions here, so I'll couch that. There's a local news, as we know, desert in a lot of places, right?
Hmm.
As that term has been called. And the reasons for that, frankly, we could sit here and have a whole nother podcast on the decline of the local newspaper and what that's done to communities from there. So like I actually truly believe in this, and I think it's a issue. I live in Chicago. For those that are listening, I live in the Wicker Park community in Chicago. I read Block Club, which is a little
Hmm.
local, covers the neighborhoods of Chicago, of what's going on, what restaurants are happening, what's going on with my aldermen, things along those lines. And I read Crane's Business here in Chicago, which covers the business community, what's happening on that. Unfortunately, and this is, and again, I say this not because of a knock on the publication. I really don't consume the Chicago Tribune. The Chicago Tribune, to me, doesn't have what I'm looking for in a local media company in today's world. And I
Hmm.
think that's unfortunate. I'm not saying that's what it is, but as someone who's now lived in Chicago for almost a decade, I get my sources of what's happening in the local community in Chicago from Block Club and from Crane's Business Report. So I'm saying that because my bias and my opinion is based on that. So I kind of want to put that out there as a point of view. If I was starting a local community, local publication, I would absolutely think about the community and the content that is going to resonate with that community. We do not need another publication that is saying, what's happening in the national level, right? That just doesn't resonate here. We do need publications that are covering the local courthouses and what's happening with local regulations. We need publications that are covering the local business community and what's happening there. And we need publications that are covering nightlife and bars and restaurants and sports and things like that within the local community. To me, those types of pillars, right, are really what the local reader is looking for. Now, which way you go with that, whether it's a kind of a what I would call the, city and regional type publication, like Chicago Magazine, for example, which covers kind of the what's happening from a city and regional perspective, or you're going from more of a sort of more, I would call it professional environment with Crane's business report down to a block club type where you're down into the community is up to the publisher to figure out what makes sense for them from there. But broadly speaking, I think those three pillars make sense, right? Business, arts and entertainment, and then something around kind of local politics or local issues. And those can blend back and forth. So that's what I would focus on if I was a local publisher today.
That's yeah. That's very well said. Like everything you said. I love Block Club has come up so many times on this podcast. I think I've been talking with one of the folks there about coming on the podcast,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
they've just come up over and over and over again. I hear nothing but good things about that.
And it's really, at least, there was Patch back in the day, for those who are familiar with
Hmm.
Patch. So there's Axios Local has done a lot of things, tried to in the local community. So you have these sort of local publications that are really trying at the national level, both at the community level. But at least in the Chicago area, I'm really impressed with what Block Club is, what they've done. Because that's what I care about. What
Yeah.
what cool restaurant or thing is happening in the Wicker Park area? Where can I take my daughter to that's kind of cool that's coming up? Those are the things that matter. Switching gears, answering your question on what type of data I might want to
Mm.
ask.
Yeah.
I truly, truly believe we have missed the boat at local for at a minimum, you should be asking email address and then zip code. And the reason zip code is important is there is so much data appending you can do once you have the zip code and
Hmm.
that person's email. Now you can then progressively profile that individual, right? And particularly if you're offering a paid subscription, you can ask more information, address, and those types of things. But if you aren't offering a paid component and you just want something to register or give you information, at a minimum, you need to be asking email and zip code. And I would even argue maybe even their cell phone number too, if you have that. What the zip code does is if you know that person is in that zip code, you can start to append all types of demographic data, potential household income, political leanings, all of that rich information. And if you build the right profile around that, you can start to go to local communities like or local advertisers like a car dealership or a law firm or insurance brokers who want to say, you know what, I've got 3,000 people in this zip code. If you're a car dealership and you are trying to sell maybe a high-end vehicle or something, oh, that's awesome. I can actually target those people in that zip code, right? I know and I can append that to the information. So I have said over and over to local community or local publishers, at a very minimum, ask email and or phone number and then zip code, because the data you can then sort of bring into that profile, whether you ask the community audience member or not, that's just been great data, right? And you can start to really have an interesting conversation with your advertisers on how you can start to target and be more effective for them in the local community. And it also helps you just better understanding of where your traffic's coming from locally, right? From that perspective also.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I haven't had anybody on the hundred whatever episodes we've had talk about zip code, but that makes a lot of sense.
It's such a simple thing that people will give you, right? Because
Yeah.
you're not giving, some people may not want to give their address, fair, right?
Hmm.
And now if you're signing up for a subscription, you probably need to just for credit card reasons. But if you're not, you have a newsletter and you're trying to target local community, I still know I see it over and over again why we don't have zip code. Simple, right? And I'd give it in a heartbeat. Oh yeah, local
Yeah.
newsletter. Here's my email and here's my zip code. So you guys
Yep.
know here's what I want to know, and you can and it just allows for more long-term flexibility for the publisher and more long-term product development and insights that you can get data appends. And over time, you can always ask more of the audience member. You can progressively profile them as they come back. But at a minimum, that first declarative data should be that, in my opinion.
Yeah. And just speaking from my own experience here, I do podcasts. We create, grow, and monetize podcasts for local media companies, my company. And we use this service called Audio Go where you can create a ad and target it by zip code, which we do for podcasts,
Yeah,
and they're notoriously hard to get first party data podcasts just
yeah,
because it's an open ecosystem, notoriously.
of course.
And but what I've seen is when we target by zip code on there, like the data we get back is almost 1-to-1 from like when you look at other podcast demographic data you can
Yeah,
get out there.
yeah.
Be like, oh, this is a higher income area. Oh yeah, look at this spike there. It is like I can't imagine for email and like all the stuff you were talking about how valuable that is.
Yeah, it's
Also,
incredibly
yeah,
valuable. And so that to me is just such a simple thing that we can do as an industry that helps us be better, right? And listen, you may never use it, but why not ask it, right?
right,
I mean,
yeah,
it just seems like a no-brainer to me.
and it's an easy ask. Like I'm like that's not too much information. Whatever. Yeah, eight
Yeah, it's
one four zero
not. It
one.
doesn't
Yeah,
feel, you're not like giving me my exact place where I live, which people might be weird about potentially.
yeah,
I think we personally feel like that ship has left, but whatever.
yeah.
But I do think it's an easy way out, particularly if it's local. That's the thing that like frustrates me. It's just like you're a local community and I'm signing up for your newsletter. Of course, I want you to know where I am, right? Of
Mm-hmm.
course, at least generally within the Chicago area where I am reading your content from. I mean, again,
Right.
I have a a different I have a bias to that, of course, because of just my work in the industry, but it just seems like a something people would do very easily.
Awesome, man. So
Yeah,
cool. I'm clipping some of that out. I'll have to make some clips out of that part because it's really,
sure,
really
absolutely.
valuable stuff.
Yeah.
Um, awesome, James. I've touched on everything I had for you.
Okay.
If you have anything else, I'd love to hear it. But if not, where can people find you online? What do you want me to promote? What do you want me to
Yeah,
link
no, and
to?
I appreciate that. First of all, a big fan of local media. So, Omeda would love to work with more local media companies. I think we work with a lot of, I would call the business publications, Arkansas business, Louisiana business out of Baton Rouge, Virginia business out of Richmond. So we definitely work with in that. We actually work with a couple newspapers now out of the Cox Media brands out of Dayton, Ohio, smaller publications, but we'd love to help and support this community. And so if folks are interested in what Omeda is doing and how we can help you, please reach out to me. My email is jcapo@omeda.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on X at I think it's James Capo is my handle, but I'm very available and this is what we do. I think people should know that like this is how my entire organization thinks about media. All of our clients are media and publishing, so we're very connected to this ecosystem. I mean, also we have our annual client event, and Paul, you should come in April. I know you've only been to Chicago once, but it's the end of April here in Chicago, April 27th, 28th, and 29th, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It's a big content day on Tuesday. Speakers from around the industry talking about how they operate. We have some boot camps and hands-on experiences with our platform. And then we have our annual sort of appreciation client event actually at Wrigley Field this year, where
Cool,
we will be there on the field, on the warning track. Cubs aren't in town, tours of the stadium. So if anyone would like to come, please reach out. We'd love to get you here. And Paul, obviously, if you can make it, love to have you here as well for that.
man. That's gonna be a hard one to turn down. Like I said, I came to Chicago in mid-September. The one time I came, and it was the most beautiful city,
Yeah.
most beautiful time of year ever. So
Yeah.
April's
April,
late April seems like another nice time to
it
yeah, but
could be
could be going
75
away.
beautiful, or it could potentially be 40 and snowing. Who knows?
Oof, yeah, I know how that
But
goes.
we're supposed to be 70 on Monday here, so I think
Oh,
we're hopefully turning
nice.
the corner at some point. So
Awesome, man. All right, James, thank you so much. This was a great one. I really appreciate it.
yeah,
And yep, you have a
absolutely. And
great
listen,
day.
if I know you're joining this company or your call here with your friends or that community.
Yeah,
Obviously, if there's anything I can help there, or anyone has any questions, please just send them my way.
I will. I will. Cool. All right.
Awesome. All right,
Thanks,
man.
James.